Hi there. I wanted to let you know that what you're about to listen to is part two of my conversation with our guest. And I really encourage you to listen to part one in addition to. It can be in a different order, but make sure that you get the whole conversation. The conversation was so rich that we needed to split it up into two episodes. So take a listen, make sure you catch the first part, and
Sure.
enjoy.
Now, one of the things that you are very involved in is the Better Man Conference. And I'm curious about your work in that. Describe what that work is. What is
Mm.
the
Thank you,
impact
Kim.
of that
So
work?
we have a
How can
conference coming up,
people
a
get
virtual
involved in that?
conference on October 18th and 19th, and this is 2023. It used to be in person, and it used to be called the Better Man, and we actually are calling it Better Together. And we're making it longer and more inclusive of and welcoming and sort of
Okay.
proactively inviting a greater diversity of audience members. But I do believe because of the origins of the conference, it will be the most the most white cisgender men and men of all identities that you will see in a conference on this topic, on the topic of inclusive leadership, which is really, really cool. And to answer your question,
Okay.
I've been involved for probably, 7 or 8 years or since the
Yes.
conference started. And it just is so good for the soul to witness people making time to dive into their own diversity stories, to explore that, to look at their biases, to share their vulnerabilities, to do that in the company of other men. To witness that is as a cisgender woman, and as a white woman, it's really healing for me, and it's been healing for those of us, the guys, and also all of us around those learners, because as they have their aha moments and trust themselves, then trust each other, then trust us like others. As that process happens, it's obviously transformative for them, and for their institutions, because they go back, and usually it's corporate folks. And so traditionally we'll have like a contingent from Cisco. Always is very involved, for example, the tech company, and they have they have a Men for Inclusion initiative internally at Cisco that I was a part of helping to build 10 years ago. And it's still growing and gaining traction and members and profile. And so it's really neat just to think about that one company and how steadfast they've been in building that internally, and then coming to a conference like this to get new ideas, to role model what this looks like, to bring their experience into the room, to say, here's what works, here's what doesn't. But what's non-negotiable to me is that there's a want and a need and a hunger on the part of male identified humans to learn and to be seen and to be included in this work and to be enlisted and to be clearer on what they can do to contribute. Like, that is right there for us. And I just coming back to that and reminding myself about that, because sometimes I get into that cynical space of that they don't get it, they'll never get it, they're whatever, they. And it's been so important for my own practice of inclusion that I walk the talk, to come into these rooms and then to go out into the client stuff I do, which is not the Better Man Conference audience, and to remind myself, like, these are humans sitting in front of me, and I have no idea how quickly they can learn, how fast they can turn, how much they can take in, how much they can surprise me, how somebody could start, at the beginning of a 2-hour session and delight me unexpectedly, because I just didn't looking at them, which is so limited, right? We have our biases and they show up in all kinds of ways. Even if you're the facilitator, you've been doing this for a really long time, you're putting
Yeah.
people in boxes all the time. And you're limiting their own capabilities. So now I walk in and
Yeah.
I know I'm going to be surprised. I just know it. So then I'm coming in, the palette I am painting from is kind of just my job is to give enough room and just give enough information and just see like what comes up. And somebody who starts really strong ends up, wow, they're kind of not as far as I thought they would be, and like prepare for things to shift and change. And it's just so fascinating, like to see, and so rewarding to see the aha moment. So I would really encourage everybody to look into the conference. We're going to be teaching, bringing some of my team together, other external advisors and experts, to do some panels, to share what they're working on. Lots of personal stories from some white male executives that are joining to say why they're so passionate about this work and how they've led it in their organizations, which I think is a really important thing to hear because it's just not public. It's never really, I don't think it's ever made very public or overt in a way that we can witness it and learn from it. And that's part of why I'm so dedicated to this is getting these stories out there so that people can say that look like that guy can say, oh, I think, I mean, I could do that, but that's not that hard. This is not scary. This is not something that's going to hurt my career. You know, that role modeling and that mirroring is so important. We need somebody that looks like us, fortunately or unfortunately, to be able to see if I did that, here's how that would go. And if I said those words, or what is my version of those words, or how would I take those lessons and build it in my environment? That's what I want people to walk away from this experience with. And also the whole day too is about storytelling. So digging under our waterline in the iceberg, thinking about like, how do I enter this conversation? Because a lot of people are stuck. They can get all excited, but they just don't know how to start. And they feel really awkward and really like they're intruding, really like they're kind of not where they should be or aren't invited or aren't welcomed. And I think we on the other side of receiving those efforts, I'm not sure we've been very adept at inviting and pulling in and right. Like we've been judgmental about and impatient
Agreed.
with how people show up when they're
Agreed.
just learning. I think I can say that, you know, unless you've done some really deep work on yourself and you approach this constantly with space, grace, forgiveness, you know, trust, patience, but it's been a hard time. And so to be patient, to have grace means that to me that we have the stores to draw on. And a lot of us are really brittle right now. We're really tired. We're very fatigued. We feel like we've been pushing the boulder uphill. We feel we've been the only one. And this sort of constant vigilance around safety and belonging, it can feed your soul, but it also can just completely dissipate all of the stores that you would draw on to be patient for others, to allow others to be heard. So I understand where we're at. But I just want to like remind us, we are change makers. We bring light, you know, and a lot of people need that grace and patience and encouragement. You're doing great. Hey, here's some feedback. Hey, try it this way next time. I see you. I see you trying. I see you wanting to be here. I see that. I welcome it. I celebrate it. I appreciate it. I recognize it. Let's roll up our sleeves together. And I think this is a two-way street. And the conference is going to create space for that to practice that so that we can return to our organizations with more hope, more positivity, more partnership, more conversation, and more honestly seeing each other and being kind to each other, because we're never going to get anywhere if we are judging people who, by the way, we are all learners. There is not a single one among us that doesn't need somebody to reach out to us and say, hey, I see you. It's not perfect. It needs a little work. It needs a lot of work. And you know what? I'm going to be your mentor, your sponsor, your champion, your partner in learning.
Right.
I love that. I'm a partner to a lot of people who have a lot more privilege than I do. And I feel I'm a mentor to them. And I love that role. I love that role.
Yeah. It's an important one. You know, one thing that came up for me when you were talking was I remember sitting with my girlfriend at the end of the Barbie movie and thinking to myself, will men see this as this permission to recognize that patriarchy doesn't work for them either? Well, they see this as an invitation to DEI work in the workplace, that not only does it not work for women, non-binary, et cetera, but it also doesn't work for them. Will they see that? You know? And some of us, in the way that we've handled our communications around DEI, we've remarginalized, you know? So it's really bringing in that invitation. I was working with the client on a training, and somebody said, how do I convince somebody to understand why DEI is important? And I said, you don't. That's going to piss you off, but I'm going to be honest with you. You don't.
What do you mean?
You can't. You know, and they're like, what? You know, I thought there was like tips and techniques as part of this training. And I'm like, yeah, I'm all about practical application, and I'm being really practical here. You can't. And it's up to the person to change. But what you can do is share your story and invite them into the work as they are, recognizing, as Reverend Michael Bernard Beckwith says, you know, welcome, glad you're here. You know,
the one thing I
good to
ask you
see you.
is to
Come as you are, but you
be
can't stay
ready
that
to
way.
change and be changed,
So,
right? Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Allow yourself that permission to free not only me, you know, whoever me is, but it's also freeing yourself from the boxes that you yourself have been put in by these societal, what has become norms. But
I
it's like,
love it. Kim,
this
I
is
just have to
freedom
say,
and liberation for
I first learned about the
everybody.
man box at the Better Man Conference.
Everybody.
Tony Porter and Tony Porter's TEDx, which is incredible. I recommend everybody check it out.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
that was transformative for me to realize the liberation that we're actually talking about is from from the things that keep us all
Yeah.
down and have been so painful for male identified folks to, you know, banish a lot of who they are to fit in. And when they break out of that mold, I appreciate and see the courage that it takes to go from an insider to an outsider in challenging the things that perhaps have protected you, but also have tortured you, also have required compliance and a sort of narrowing out of all of who you are, you know, and all the messiness of a human. So I when that kind of dawned on me and really landed, it reminded me we have remarginalized. And when we talk about privilege, privilege has been weaponized and remarginalized or marginalized a different group of people for just, you know, how they were born, where the circumstances into which they were born. And I think what we can hold people accountable for is, what have you done with the privileges that you have? That's the conversation. It's not that you have the things or you don't have the things. And in fact, we all have privileges, and we all have been, to a degree, experienced exclusion too. So where I've landed on that is, you know, I speak and I talk about my privileges frequently because I hope that I'm role modeling that so that other leaders that have at least the same skin color and gender identity that I do, cisgender, will say, oh, maybe it's not about me. You know, the Pain Olympics, I think intimidates people because they don't think they have anything to share. And they don't think that when they look at their life, they haven't had that lived experience, you know, of being mistrusted and hearing the microaggressions every day. And okay, no, but what they can hold themselves accountable for is to say, I'm in those rooms. I can walk around the world and not experience these safety concerns. I can be heard. I do receive unearned trust because of how I appear. So if we could heighten the awareness of that, it does not make you a bad person. It just means that you've probably never connected the dots between what you were given and yes, you worked hard, what you earned. But by the way, everybody has worked hard. And some of us have had to work a lot harder to overcome. That's all that is, right? But like, what are you doing with it? You know, my mom always said, to whom much is given, much is expected. And I used to roll my eyes and say, what does it have to do with? I did not understand what that meant until I started doing DEI work, and really until I had my own awakening, because I was like, you probably, Kim, it was like LGBT was like my first kind of social justice cause. Like I was all about it, right? And I was the marginalized, and I was on that panel, like you said earlier, to be the one and to talk about what I was experiencing and the rights that I didn't have and the protections that I didn't have, whatever. But now I have so much more awareness of my cisgender privilege. You know, I have so much more awareness of my skin color privilege, so much my femme presenting privilege, right? I can pass. I have passing privilege. Like, I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. And when it finally dawns on you, the question should be, okay, what am I doing with this? How am I using it every day? Who am I lifting up? Where am I joining my capital with someone else? Where am I shining a light on somebody's experience that's not my own? And more, that's where that's what I wake up with I've been there, done that with my LGBTQ identity. You know, I've been many years in that, and I get it, and I kind of feel like I'm, you know, I'm reconciled on that, right?
Yeah.
I know what I'm doing with that, but I think that we have so much more we can explore, and that may be a way in for those of you who are listening with some of
Yeah.
those leaders that are really digging their heels in. They're probably doing that because they've been told, they've heard some things, and they've been told some things that probably aren't, I won't say they're not true, but it's not really actionable for them, and it's more of a shaming intent. And that is not a place we learn from.
DEI is not meant to destroy.
No, it
It
should
is
never ever
meant to
feel that way.
create. DEI is meant to build up, not knock you down. It's
Yeah.
not meant to be weaponized. Yeah, it's not meant to be weaponized. It's meant to
Yes,
unite,
indeed.
you know?
So
And
that's what we mean
so
by going
let's
back to go forward,
have
because
that impact.
when we were talking about earlier, what we sort of left unfinished, like you phrased it, I think you said, we sort of, okay,
Yeah.
we've done it, like, let's go home. And then this void, we left it open. And then this huge sort of thing came into that space, and
We left the
we weren't
space, yep.
done. And not
Mhm.
only that, our strategy
Yeah.
wasn't complete. So, and we got tired, and that makes total sense.
Yeah.
We're all tired. We're the walking wounded, coming out of the last couple of years. So I understand why we like left it all on the field. Like we just left it all. Like we all feel that way. We gave it all. And it just, it's exhausting. And yet, you know, I think so. I just think it's really interesting to think about, like, how might we have sustained ourselves more for the long game? I ask myself that. I think about allyship, and I think about how allies,
Yeah.
when activated, allies alleviate
Mhm.
some of the work. They carry the load, they carry the water. In the relay race, we pass the baton to them, and then they take it and they run, and we can sit down and breathe and take a rest. The problem is, a lot of us are the warriors, right? We are the, I'm going to do it, nobody else is. I'm alone in my organization. I'm the one in the right. I'm the one in the room. And I think we kind of default to this, I'm going to carry all of it myself, space and place. And it only hurts us in the end. I think we have to be smarter, work smarter, not harder. Like when we think about how we create change, who we create change through and with, I would encourage us to wake up every day and think about allyship and how we have a team that's a relay team that's ready to go. And it's not just folks that are struggling through their own marginalization, but it's kind of everyone, especially those of us who have more stores that haven't been depleted. And I would define that as people with more privilege in the world, because when you have that to draw on, it means that you're not coping with all the headwinds every single moment of every day. You know what I mean? Like, so you finish a day, and the hardest things that you dealt with are not the microaggressions
Right.
constantly.
Yeah.
They're not being passed over. They're not being talked over. They're not being, you know, coping with your kid and what they
Right.
experienced at
Right.
school because of their skin color or their gender. Like, it's not that. It is, wow, I finished this day and my hardest thing was. Can't we just look at it that way? Say, so wake up and say, how can I take some of what I have and enable somebody else to benefit from it? So allyship comes from that place, and we desperately need it. But right now I see it as very imbalanced. It's not, the resources aren't being shared in community the way that they really should, so that some of us are sort of starving for it, and others have an abundance of resources to draw on, right? And kind of, you know, rebalancing that.
That's a great point.
Exactly.
That's a great point. We don't have, you know, and I say this about where money is allocated, kind of to our earlier point. It's like we don't have a supply problem, but we have a distribution problem. And I really like how you just described that. Like there's some of us that are walking around like with our coffers full, like, oh, and then we can't figure out why somebody else is like, you know, still in, you know, struggling with their limited definition of masculinity. And it's like not getting into the work. And it's like, no, you have permission to redefine masculinity. And here's some of what I have to give you some space in order to explore what does that look like, and know that you have people that have your back as you go through that redefining masculinity work. It's like, so there is that distribution of support, whatever is needed, whatever it looks like,
Time,
resourcing,
energy,
accountability,
positivity,
mentorship, sponsorship, as you mentioned,
optimism, like all
and
those
all of the work,
intangibles. It is,
time.
you're right.
Yeah.
It's assets,
Yeah.
right? It's the stuff. And it can
Mhm.
make or break somebody's day, somebody's career trajectory. A
Yeah.
little bit goes a long way too. I say to leaders, a little bit, like, because you have so much power that you are underutilizing. You have so much visibility. You have so much, a decision on your part to share, to be intentional, to be proactive, to mention something, to make a decision that changes a policy. You can change the day to day of thousands of people. And to me, that is wow. Like, don't squander that. That is gold.
And you got to pick up.
And please,
Yeah. And pick up when we need some
oh my
rest,
goodness, yes. And yet,
because
like, and then they'll
mental
push back
health
and
and
say, I don't
wellness
want to be the
is
savior.
a
Like,
real thing.
I
Yeah.
know that, I've heard that I shouldn't sail in and save the day and become the problem because I'm in my enthusiasm and good intentions. And I'm like, yes, okay, good. I'm glad you're really aware of
Right.
that, and let's think about a way that is respectful, that doesn't deplete the oxygen in the room, but you can kind of steer and point those assets so that they will make the most difference. And I think a really good leader is always asking for feedback. Hey, I did that, or you coached me to do this and I did it, and here's how it felt, and here's how it went, and how was it received? Communicators need to be obsessed with, it's not the message you intended, it's the message that was received. And allyship, you're never an ally, finished product ally. You are an ally in development, in training. And the in training part means you go back, you calibrate, you change, you fail sometimes, you succeed sometimes, but all in the eye of the beholder, all in the eye of the recipient. And that's really what matters. So checking your decisions and actions and saying, did that have the desired impact? If not, let me go back to the drawing board. Let me modify. Let me have low ego about it, and let me have a lot of humility about it, because it is this iterative process, and it's an experimental process of, oh, that works. Oh, that resonated. Oh, I'll do more of that because somebody really appreciated it. But then, like, being humble to say, wow, that worked for that person, but it may not work for this person. And sort of always challenging everything you think you should constantly be saying, okay, I think I know that, but let me be open to it not having the same impact here, 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 here. And what I'm talking about right now might be really overwhelming and frustrating for leaders, because it's, as soon as you make a point, you have to make the opposite point. And I'm like, stick with me, like, stay with me. This is nuanced, it's delicate, it is literally building a new leadership. This is literally, like you said
Yeah.
earlier, nobody has ever been judged on this. And even if we were to hold people accountable, we don't even have the right measurement tools in place, I think, to say to a leader, oh, we're rolling out, like, we're going to measure how inclusive you are. That, it, like, barely exists. So that speaks to the complexity of what we're talking about, and yet how exciting it is that we are starting to nail it down. We're starting to define it. And I know we're going to be there someday very soon. And you're going to get your report card and your 360 on how you're doing. And it's going to be thought through, and it's going to somehow capture the intangible and make it tangible. But I think even us in our field, we're trying to figure out what that means, and how would we know? How would we see a leader leading in this way? And how are they received by others? And is it working? How can we give somebody a report card and see growth year over year? And that's, I think, I can't right now sitting here, I have my tools, you have your tools, but I think we're sort of at the beginning stages of this, and it's really an exciting time to reinvent how leaders will be able to show up in the future with this information someday.
And it sounds to me, I'm taking from like how we started the conversation of you saying that this was 20, 25 years ago when I started to get into this, the kind of conversations that we're having now, the kind of questions that are coming up, the kind of emotional intelligence that is being required to help us navigate this in the workplace. It sounds like this is kind of a new level.
Funny you bring up emotional
in the
intelligence.
work.
A lot of these, like,
what you've
famous
seen in the
leadership
past. Is that
constructs,
accurate?
they were created by white men. And I'm not saying they're not brilliant and amazing, and they're on my shelves, right? And I also notice who's not on my shelves. And so everybody that's writing a leadership book now is doing sort of the cursory chapter / couple pages on the DEI lens, right? But they're not the experts. And honestly, this is like the bulk of the change is what you and I were talking about. So, I think that's interesting. Like, I think, those of us you who are communicators, think
Yeah,
about the
exactly.
trainings that you're rolling out. Think about the models you use in your organization. Think about who developed them. Think about what might be missing from them, right? Yeah, seriously, because they're incomplete. They're
The
not
benefit.
incorrect,
Yeah,
but
who
they're
really
incomplete.
benefit.
And so we can say, hey, like the creators of things always bring their bias to them. And the bias often is not a proactive bias. It might be just what's missing. It's just what's missing. Emotional intelligence looks so different through the lens of identity, like all day long. I mean, I should write that book, but these models I love, like conscious incompetence and the ladder of inference and all this great stuff that I studied in my master's program. I think about what is the version of that specifically uses examples of DEI, and how can we marry these things? Everything we do from now on needs to be seen through that lens and made relevant, right, for today and tomorrow.
Completely agree.
Okay.
Yes, completely agree. So we're going to turn this into a two-parter because there's so much good stuff here. And so I've got 2 more questions for you. The first one is, help us as communicators understand, what does communicate like you give a damn look like, or sound like, feel like? What would you like
you
to
give a
see
damn.
us
Let's think
do
about that.
as communicators to help
To me,
the executives that you support?
To me, it means that
Like we
you
give a damn. What does
become,
that mean?
on this topic we're talking about, that you become much more proactive than you've been in the past. I think communications professionals, I can imagine, I'm not one technically, but I feel like it's a huge part of my job, as I said.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it is nudging a lot more strongly, perhaps,
1,000%,
than you
yeah.
have in the past. Perhaps when you think about where you are in the way you use your voice as an educator, because it's not enough to just reflect what somebody wants to communicate, and wordsmithing and making that pretty and, corporatizing the language and doing the things that we do. It's really having a point of view about inclusive communications. So I would say, if I were hiring a communications professional and I ran them through my questions about how deeply do you understand the DEI lens on every incident, every change, every communication, every event, everything we communicate about, every product, customer communications, how are you seeing that through that lens? That would be, to me, table stakes for communications professionals. So if you're listening to this and you don't think you do very well on those questions, like you give a damn, to me, is I care about this topic personally, I hope. But like we were saying, like, it's not necessarily a personal belief that you believe in it, but it is your job as a communications professional to me, part of your job description is to enable your clients to speak and communicate in a way that is inclusive, and that you know what the landmines are, you know what they're going to think of and not think of, you know how to coach them, you know how to lead them to getting comfortable with communicating in a more inclusive way, even if they're sort of, pushing back and you need to literally put words in their mouth. I do think that leaders that we serve, they need a lot of help, and they need a lot of encouragement, and they need the words sometimes to be put in their mouth. So, right. So like you give a damn is showing up and being ready, being educated about these
Yes,
things,
that's a great
knowing
point.
how to
Great point.
guide,
Yeah.
and having a point of view, and almost being sort of mentoring that leader to a place where they are going to get more comfortable, assuming they're uncomfortable, which is a safe assumption. Get more comfortable and then more confident, competent, and then more confident in not even
Yeah.
needing you at some point. So your goal should be, wow, like this happened in the news. We know that our Black community is hurting, or our LGBTQ plus community of employees is hurting. This leader came to me and said, I know that happened. I want to communicate something about it. I have drafted something to communicate about it. Here's my strategy. And then you, as a communication professional, get to polish. Imagine growing your leaders to the point where they have that kind of competence and confidence. So that would be amazing. Yes. And then, we say we want to be out of a job. We don't.
And you don't have to
We
rewrite
don't, but we
completely.
want to be working on what's next. And we want the bandwidth to do that. So you need teaching the fish, people to fish is really apt, I think, for this. You need to enable people to do it for themselves. But there are many suggestions you need to make along the way. Lead the horse to water, the breadcrumbs. Leaders don't respond well to force, but it depends on the leader. But like you said, you can invite, you can cultivate, you can facilitate, and you can provide the information. And leaders are smart. They're not there for no reason. I think you said that, Kim. That's in one of our conversations. You said they're there because they're very talented at what they do. So they have I think they have a lot of capacity for rapid change. I do. But I think we need to figure out the acceleration. We're the accelerant of that. And then the autonomy that they will have being in relationship with somebody like us that is nudging, suggesting, coaching, holding the space for giving the feedback, and all that's way that you can be in partnership with that leader as they grow to the point where they may not need you for the same things a year from now that they need you for now. That is, to me, that is how I would judge your success.
That's important because they are evolving. And they need to know that they have a safe space to come and talk and get support. But at the same time, we need to help them kind of be like a workout buddy, and help them with some of their language and help them sometimes save them from themselves.
I would say
I've done that a number of times of helping some executives save them from themselves.
Group of people. I think that the shallow end of the pool versus the deep end, it's the floaties. Right. It's, right. It's the training wheels. It's the assistive technology. It's the workplace accommodation that some of us need, to use. And we may always need to use that because as things get more complex to respond to, we always need the assistive technology. We always will need that to calibrate and check and have a confidential conversation. And so I would really suggest for leaders that if you can be one of those people, surround that person with others of different identities that are able to model that grace and space, that meeting people where they're at ethos that we talked about, and have that kind of testing, that board of directors that is your inner circle before you go big, public, loud, to one to many. Communications, you're incubating and you're trying to keep this seedling of this leader changing into a new kind of leader. You're trying to protect that seedling in the greenhouse. You're watering it. You're making sure it gets enough light. You're making sure the soil is healthy and giving nutrients but it's fragile. And as leaders become a different version of themselves, there's a fragility to it. I don't mean white fragility, although there is that too. But it's more what I'm talking about is the fragility of letting a new part of yourself come to the fore, right. And then beginning to lead with that part of yourself more, right? Bringing that humility, empathy, transparency, a lot of the stuff that we know, particularly Gen Z, is looking for in leaders, but it's a seedling, and giving that the support that it needs so that it can one day grow stronger and set down deep roots and become this beautiful thing someday. You can't keep squashing it. You can't keep stepping on it. You can't keep starving it. Think about it, right? You're growing something new, and you're growing it in yourselves too. Because by the way, every bit of advice you give is part of your new toolkit. Yeah. You are growing as the leader that you're in partnership with is growing. You're changing, you're transforming, you're adding to your toolkit so that you're a more multifaceted professional that knows how to grow leaders into the future version of themselves.
set ourselves and our leaders up for success. And
I
given
hope
the
so.
amount of
Oh my
analogies
gosh.
that we have shared over this time period, something has got to land for everybody. I love the visualizations,
We
the
talked about
pictures with
floaties.
words, across
Gosh, we
all the
really did kind of
swimming
run the
pools
gamut.
and the seedlings, all the different analogies. Yeah, something has had to land it.
Well, thanks, Kim.
Yeah.
So, like I
How
said, I
do
have this
people
wonderful
continue to
consulting
work
arm
with
of
you, Jennifer,
jenniferbrownconsulting.com.
and stay in touch
So
with
please
you?
visit us there, get on our mailing lists, attend our programs, many of which are free. And then we do deep strategy and training work with like D&I councils, with affinity groups and ERGs, with executive teams. Like I said, I spend a lot of my time with those leadership teams and also keynoting on stages all over. I love that work. Pick up my book, my latest book, which is a second edition of How to Be an Inclusive Leader, which we painstakingly rewrote about a year ago. My podcast is The Will to Change. So we explore a lot of these same kinds of themes on that. And if you're interested in me as a speaker and a leadership team coach or one-on-one work, I'm at jenniferbrownspeaks.com. So you can find me there too. And in social, we're everywhere. Instagram is Jennifer Brown Speaks. X, whatever that is, it's at Jennifer Brown. No comment. And then on LinkedIn, Facebook, Jennifer Brown Consulting. It's all me. All roads lead back to me and my team. And we would love to hear from you all. And I'm really excited about some new stuff I'm planning, like working one-on-one with people and unpacking a bunch of the stuff that we talked about today about leadership and evolution. And I love that work. It's so enjoyable and satisfying for me. It's really neat.
All the last 20 years that you've been doing this work has led you to a time such as this, so thank you for bringing all that expertise, because we really need somebody to be, we need you in those boardrooms and in those C-suites to really help our leaders become that inclusive leader, that leader for the next generation of work, the future of work, all of the ways that people are describing the change has already happened. So now our focus and our energy needs to go on helping people discover and explore who they are in this change and molding this kind of a next evolution of who we are and what that means for our workplace, and defining what the workplace looks like, sounds like, feels like, because that's the evolution. That's the change management that a lot of us as communicators are starting to wake up and into.
Yeah.
Jennifer,
Totally.
this has been the most incredible time hanging out with you. It was really great to meet you in Denver at NGLCC and do a book event with you. I look forward to the next time that we cross paths again. Thank you again for the testimonial on our book, The Conscious Communicator.
Yeah, I mean,
just last week it was the 1-year anniversary of the release of the book.
It's a huge
deal.
Like,
yeah.
Books are like a part of our bodies. Like putting it out in the world and saying, "Do you like it? Is it helpful?"
Yeah.
Very vulnerable. Yeah, chop.
Yeah, exactly. Do I need to go in the corner and cry? No, and the fact that you did 4, and I'm thinking like 1 was, whew. Oh gosh. Now I am going to go in the corner and cry. Jennifer, thank you so much for your time. And everybody, make sure that you follow her on social. Check out her podcast, The Will to Change, and take your notes and put it to action. Thanks for being here, everybody. So what popped out to you from the conversation? The more conscious communicators in the world, the better the world. So go to communicatelikeyougiveadamnpodcast.com and set up a one-on-one strategy session. And until next time, let's keep taking care of each other.